It might sound crazy, but at the end of this, I just want to survive. Why would you say that? Because sometimes it feels like I'm at war with myself. I feel like a prisoner trapped within my own skin. My mind is my captor, and I'm at the mercy of my thoughts as they spin around me.
Bethany Boik had many demons and many false diagnoses, and they were all working against her. How do you fight when you're not sure who the enemy is? Schizoaffective disorder, when the enemy is yourself. This week on My Healthy Mind, let's talk about it. Welcome to My Healthy Mind. I'm Michael Hunter. To most people, the term schizoaffective disorder is probably a new one. What is it? What are its consequences? To Bethany Boik, schizoaffective disorder was also a new and unknown term, although she had suffered from the disorder for more than a decade. Today, schizoaffective disorder is diagnosed more frequently than in the past because it is better understood. Yet still, less than 1% of Americans have been diagnosed with this complex mental illness. And it may never be known how many sufferers have gone undiagnosed, or worse, misdiagnosed.
Schizoaffective disorder is a unique disorder that is a combination of both psychotic features and mood disorder. So specifically, it's a version of schizophrenia mixed with either severe depression or bipolar manic kinds of behaviors and experiences. And that's why it's sometimes difficult for a practitioner to be able to diagnose it accurately, because they misdiagnose it as sometimes panic disorder if they come in anxious about what's going on. Sometimes if they're being more into their psychotic features, they'll see it as schizophrenia and they'll call it schizophrenia. Or if they're having the bipolar manic kinds of behaviors or severe depression, they will see it as either depression or bipolar disorder. It's less important to be able to put a label on it. It's more important to try and figure out what the process is so you can treat it accurately and help them recover and have some kind of a meaningful life.
Today, my colleague Elizabeth Atkins speaks with Bethany Boik, who shares her long, frightening struggle with and ultimate triumph over schizoaffective disorder.
So I understand you grew up in a very dysfunctional family, drug-addicted parents, alcoholic grandfather, living with relatives and friends rather than your own parents. What was it like growing up?
Growing up, I was the only child of two addicts. And, I lived in poverty, with my mother half the time. We didn't have any food to eat. And it was just chaos. It was pure chaos all the time. My mom was a severe binge drinker, and at nighttime, she would just explode. And I just prayed. I prayed and prayed and prayed for her that she would be okay, that we wouldn't get kicked out of where we were. When I'd ask her about what happened the night before and if she was okay, she'd be like, "Bethany, you're making up lies," and to just be quiet. So I had to hold a lot of secrets for a really long time. It hurt me because I started questioning my own self.
So in the midst of all this chaos, did you start to notice any symptoms about yourself?
I did. I actually started getting panic attacks in second grade. And so I was a 7-year-old and I was feeling like I had no air left. I was hyperventilating. I felt like I was gonna die. So I got taken to the doctors, and the doctor's like, "Oh, yeah, she must be having asthma attacks, so let's give her inhalers." So for many, many years, I was misdiagnosed as having asthma, but really I was having full-blown panic attacks since I was 7.
So you were only able to understand the concept of panic attacks in hindsight, correct?
Yes.
Okay, but you knew something was wrong.
I knew something was wrong. Yeah.
Did you feel like you were in crisis?
I did. It wasn't until later I would just start shaking uncontrollably and sobbing for no reason, no trigger. And I'd be at school and this would happen, and I have to run out of class and go to the guidance center, and they let me lie down in a room that was dark. I laid on the floor and I literally shook and sobbed for an hour and a half. No one knew what I was going through.
So your teachers are watching you have these meltdowns at school, and there was no counselor called, or?
Nope, it wasn't until maybe 10th grade, and I was in a science class, and I got a 77 on this test, and I just freaked out. I was like, I can't be like my parents. I have to be perfect. I have to get everything right to succeed. And I just started banging my head against this lab table, this very hard lab table, over and over and over, because I wanted to knock myself unconscious. That was when my principal told my mom, you need to get your daughter some help because something is wrong with her, you know, and if you don't do this, we're going to call CPS.
And then what happened? Did your mother get you some help?
My mother took me to the doctor. Then they said, you know, you have like major depression, an anxiety disorder, insomnia. And so they put me on all these medications.
How old were you?
13. And I started to feel a little bit better, but at the same time, I was still experiencing other symptoms. I was at band camp and I started hearing voices for the first time. And I had no idea what was going on. I was basically talking to my friends and we were playing, you know, I was playing the marimba and the bass drum and we were rehearsing, and all of a sudden I just kept hearing Bethany, Bethany, Bethany over and over and over. And I'm like looking around and I'm like, who's talking to me? Like, who's talking to me? And I start yelling. I'm like, who are you? Like, what are you doing? Like, it's not funny. Can you please stop? And everybody just stopped what they were doing and stared at me. And I looked around and no one was talking, but I kept hearing the voice.
Did you tell the doctor who was giving you all these medications?
I did, and she gave me an antipsychotic, and it's was normally used for bipolar at the time that I got it. And I took one pill and my kidneys almost shut down. So I ended up at the Children's Hospital for 7 days, and it was a horrible experience.
Then what happened? Was your medication changed? Or?
My mom stopped taking me to the doctors because she didn't believe in it, and she was mad at them and said that they were making me worse. So I went back to school. I tried to act like everything was normal and I was okay, but I still got really suicidal. Like, I started writing my suicide letters to people, and then one of my family members had passed away and I had to go to the funeral. And I went to the funeral and I just started sobbing, and people were like, wow, she's really affected by this. And I was thinking in my head, I'm not affected by this at all. I want to be dead. I want to be the one that's in the casket. After that, I went back to my mom's house and I attempted suicide. And at the same point that I attempted suicide, I had my first psychotic break. I started visually hallucinating religious things and figures, and I got so excited. I was like, you guys, Jesus is here and we're changing the world and we're doing all this stuff and he's gonna help me, and you know, I'm not gonna be depressed anymore. And I just had these delusions that of grandeur and of like religiosity that weren't real. You know, at the time I thought everything was real, but my doctor told me no. After that, like, my grandma took me back to the doctor. She told me, when you said that you were having, you know, those religious moments, I knew something was horribly wrong with you.
Schizoaffective disorder has often been misdiagnosed as one of a variety of other mental illnesses, including panic attacks, paranoia, and bipolar disorder, all of which are frightening. But not knowing what's wrong was more frightening for Bethany than any of those. We'll learn about Bethany's first steps towards wellness when we return.
Stress, depression, and severe mental illness can happen to anyone. Team Mental Health Services has been helping those struggling with these conditions in southeastern Michigan. Within 24 hours of reaching out to our team, members receive psychiatric evaluations and begin the necessary treatment for recovery.
Towards the 6th court date, I finally stood up and said, I can handle this process the rest of the way. And it was all because of the motivation and encouragement I got from Team Mental Health staff.
Team Mental Health Services, because we care and you can.
Magformers. Each set sold separately, batteries not included.
So this disorder tends to develop early in adulthood, between 16 and 30, typically is the age of onset. It seems to stem, because they're not really certain, but so far the evidence seems to indicate that it comes primarily from some kind of family history or genetic endowment, so that you're more likely to develop it if you have that family history.
Welcome back to My Healthy Mind. Elizabeth continues her conversation with Bethany, who shares with us her long and painful battle with schizoaffective disorder and what it took to come to terms with it.
So now you're in high school. Were there any teachers there who helped you?
Yes, I had one teacher basically tell me that, you know, hey Beth, this crap that you're turning into me as homework is crap. It's nothing. You are so far behind. You have sloppy handwriting. Like, what's going on? What's wrong? And I kind of let him into my life and told him a little bit about what was going on. And he's like, okay, well, you know, if you come before school, you know, I can help you get your grades back up and we can try to do these things together. So he helped me with that, and then things just got worse and worse. I kept having suicidal ideations throughout high school. I had a lot of, you know, just weird mental health stuff, you know, hearing voices, not knowing if they're real or not knowing if people are really spying on me or not. And I had told like some of my friends, I'm like, you know, guys, like, does this happen to you? Like, what's going on? And they're like, Bethany, no, don't say that. Like, you need to stop talking about it because no one's gonna wanna be your friend. And I'm like, yeah, you're probably right. And my grandma took me back to the doctor. They immediately put me on antipsychotics. And it made me very tired. You know, I was a 3.0, 3.5 student, and my grades went down to a 1.7 because all I did was sleep in school. The medication made me so drowsy and zombie-like. I started not hanging out with friends as much, and I just started backing away and isolating myself. And I wasn't, you know, showering, brushing my hair. I stopped doing all that stuff and just became this zombie. And I remember I had one of my best friends at the time, she self-harmed. And she said she got so much relief from it. And I was like, really, that's all you do is cut yourself and it goes away? The pain goes away? And she's like, yeah, it's so easy. So I got really excited. I'm like, this is gonna work. I'm not gonna have any of these thoughts anymore or hear any of these voices, you know? So I went in my shower and I just started cutting my inner thighs with a razor. And I'm like watching the blood go down the drain and I'm sobbing because I'm like, why isn't the voices stopping? Why is this not working? And I stopped cutting myself and I just remember curling up into a ball in my shower, just sobbing myself because it didn't work. It didn't work.
We'll have more when we return about schizoaffective disorder and Bethany's struggle with the disease and the treatments. Please stay tuned. Welcome to My Healthy Mind,
A show that dares to talk about mental health matters that touch nearly every family. Each week you'll meet guests who share their stories, hear from local experts, and learn about resources that may help.
And so I was in a committee meeting at the House of Representatives when I realized that my daughter had autism.
We need to take the stigma away from mental health issues.
No topics about mental health and wellness are off limits on our show.
Let's talk about it on My Healthy Mind.
The issue of treatment usually involves an application of some kind of medication. If the person is showing primarily with their psychotic features of hallucinating and having delusions and loose thinking, and they're mostly depressed, you would give them an antidepressant. But you might also at the same time give them an antipsychotic medication, which is affecting a different process in the brain. The other forms of treatment are cognitive behavioral therapy with a therapist, with a psychologist, oftentimes a caseworker to sort of follow them to make sure that they're staying on course about, taking the right kind of medication and using their resources that they have in their life to help guide them through, because it's very difficult for them to make an adjustment in life.
We're back on My Healthy Mind, looking into the struggle with schizoaffective disorder, why it has traditionally been so difficult to diagnose, and how to deal with this often baffling condition. Elizabeth continues with Bethany.
So let's talk about what started to work for you. When did you get a correct diagnosis and a proper treatment? When did that start?
Well, I got re-diagnosed when I was 19 as having bipolar disorder, and I thought that was the correct diagnosis, but it wasn't. So as I went through college, I had more symptoms and exhibits of like social withdrawal and isolation, and I went to a new mental health clinic to get a second opinion, and my doctor took one look at me, looked at my records, and he was like, "You have schizoaffective disorder. You have a form of schizophrenia." And I'm like, everything just made sense in that moment.
So Bethany, were you familiar what schizoaffective disorder is and how is it different from schizophrenia? Did he have to explain that, or did you already suspect?
Affective disorders, they correlate with mood disorder. So I figured it was like some form of schizophrenia with a mood disorder, and that's exactly what it was. And he told me that. And it made sense because of all the symptoms that I was having. They correlated to this disorder. It made sense.
So once you started being treated for schizoaffective disorder, you were still hospitalized. Tell us what happened with that.
Yeah. I was just trying new medications, and some of them didn't really go with me that well, and I became extremely suicidal. And while I was having paranoia and hearing voices, and so I ended up hospitalized twice in a row, and they finally found the right medication combination the second time I was in the hospital. So they changed all my medications, and I was like, thank goodness, because I had been on over 35 different medications.
35 medications?
Yes. I have an example of all the medications I've taken in the past 13 years.
Wow.
This doesn't include all the different combinations of these medications that I've had to try in order to help, fix my mental health issues.
How do you feel when you look at all those bottles?
I feel like I'm a survivor. Like I chose life and I chose opportunity. Because no matter what a doctor has told me or said to me, that could have like pushed me down, I just kept trying. I was like the little engine that could. I never gave up, and I kept pushing forward until I found that right combination.
So how do you maintain your recovery?
Well, I take my medication because that's the number one thing, and then I use coping skills that I've gained. So we talked about reality checking, and so I can do that with another person, or I can do that by myself. So when I'm having either psychosis or paranoia, I basically talk myself into reality. So I am experiencing, these non-reality situations, and I'm just checking every little thing. Like, okay, there's a bird flying around the house. How did that happen? No one opened the front door. There's no windows open. This bird cannot be real.
Do you get therapy as well?
I do. Yep, I go once a week to therapy.
And you had nowhere to turn to get more help?
No.
You couldn't go home. Your mother, father, grandmother, they didn't know what to do, right?
Yeah. I had no biological family support. I had support from my found family, as I call it. I formulated a group of friends who I live with, who care about me, who know what to do when I'm in crisis, and who are the most amazing individuals I have ever met. And I truly believe that, you know, they're gifts from God, and they help me out so much.
It's really special that your friends don't judge you or make fun of you or feel afraid of you.
I know. Yeah, I'm blessed. I'm very blessed. They are incredible people. I can tell them anything in the world, and they'll just look at me with love and try to help me out. And really, there's nothing to be afraid of, because I'm just a regular person. I just experience life in a different way than most people.
Stress, depression, and severe mental illness can happen to anyone. Team Mental Health Services has been helping those struggling with these conditions in southeastern Michigan. Within 24 hours of reaching out to our team, members receive psychiatric evaluations and begin the necessary treatment for recovery.
Towards the 6th court date, I finally stood up and said, I can handle this process the rest of the way. And it was all because of the motivation and encouragement I got from Team Mental Health staff.
Team Mental Health Services, because we care and you can.
In terms of treatment, once the person is discovered as what is really their problem and how to try and best give them the support and treatment that they need, it's important that they follow this through the rest of their life, because this is not normally a condition that somehow you can fix or cure as much as you can help them better manage it. And that management requires probably a lifetime of being on some kind of medication once you get the right regime, the right balance and mix of which ones. But mostly it's important that they have both family support, that's so important, and also other community support. The caseworker can sort of help them make sure that they stay plugged into that, because it's exceedingly difficult for these folks to be able to manage their life, and they need that extra support in order for them to be able to get through.
Although schizoaffective disorder can be a very difficult mental illness to diagnose, Bethany has proven that with the proper treatment, this terrible illness can be managed.
So you went to this doctor who recognized what was happening to you after 12 years of struggling with wrong diagnoses and incorrect treatments. Tell us how you felt when you finally learned that you have schizoaffective disorder, a correct diagnosis.
It was incredible. It was an incredible moment. I felt like a rock had lifted from my chest and I could breathe. It was like having a breath of fresh air. Like, for the first time in my life, I felt like, you know, people had said so many negative things to me. Oh, you're crazy, you're a lunatic, you're gonna amount to nothing, you're a wacko, all these things, to someone giving me a proper diagnosis for what I was living with. Yes, I have this illness. This is how it affects me. I'm not gonna let it take me down, and I'm just gonna do everything in my power to learn about it, to research it, and to exceed with it.
And did you do that? How did you research it?
I did. I bought books from, you know, online, different books, Schizophrenia for Dummies, different family therapy books, like for people that lived with loved ones with schizoaffective disorder, how to help them, you know, learn to cope with you and your, you know, problems. And I researched until I knew everything I could about the illness, and then I integrated everything in my life around that and how to help myself.
So Bethany, you struggled for so many years with wrong treatments, misdiagnoses. What's your advice to people who are going through that and they know something's wrong, they're not getting the right treatment? What would you say to them?
keep trying different doctors, keep trying different medications, and never, ever, ever give up. I remember, there have been certain points of my life where I attempted suicide 3 times. So there was 2 other times where I attempted suicide, and at that point in my life, I thought there was nothing more that could help me. And those times were the most inaccurate times of my life. But it's really not giving up. And that's the hardest thing to tell someone who literally feels completely hopeless. What do you do when someone is just like, I have no hope left? And you have to tell them, you feel like this right now, but I swear to you, if you keep trying, something is going to budge. Something will budge, and one day you're not gonna feel like this. Pain ends. And I didn't know that for many years. I didn't know that the pain goes away.
Elizabeth, what a great story of perseverance and triumph over things that people, especially children, should never have to endure.
Michael, for people who struggle with schizoaffective disorder, knowing what's real and who's on their side can be difficult. But it's great to know that with the proper diagnosis and treatment, this disorder can be managed. To help you on your quest for mental wellness, we've put information and resources on our website, myhealthymind.com. Please take a look. Visiting myhealthymind.com could be an excellent first step toward learning more about schizoaffective disorder.
And we'd like to hear from you about topics you'd like us to discuss on My Healthy Mind. We mean the tough topics that are so important to talk about openly to help remove the barriers on the path to well-being. So reach us on our website, myhealthymind.com, on Twitter at myhealthymind, or on Facebook.
Thanks for watching. We'll see you next week for another edition of My Healthy Mind. Let's talk about it. And now we'll leave you with My Healthy Minute.
My Healthy Minute, covering breaking mental health news, legislation, discoveries, and resources.
Oakland County Community Mental Health Authority work with individuals with developmental disabilities, mental illness, and substance use, such as bipolar disorders, autism, alcohol or drug usage. And we basically assist individuals in getting a grasp and a hold of the challenges that they are dealing with in life. Our goal is to basically assist them and to inspire hope in their lives, empower people, and by doing so, we're able to strengthen communities by allowing these individuals to have access to services and treatment that they would normally not have.